Christine Reynolds is the founder of the Vermont Center for Resiliency. She earned her master's degree in social work from Colorado State University and has been working in the mental health field for over 15 years. Kris has experience with EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, CBT, which of course is cognitive behavioral therapy, and mindfulness. It was while working with veterans in Colorado that Kris found her niche working with individuals who had experienced major stressors and trauma. In addition to specialization in working with individuals who've experienced complex trauma, Kris specializes in the treatment of anxiety, mood disorders, relationship conflicts, and serves children's, teens, adults, and the elderly. In addition to individual psychotherapy, she facilitates group, couples, family therapy, and provides supervision to clinicians working toward licensure and training to caregivers on trauma-informed practice. Kris believes that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to therapy and strives to meet all of her clients' needs wherever they are and to create a safe, welcoming space for clients of all identities. Kris also teaches here at Champlain College, and she's also an avid runner, like I am as well, and she loves the great outdoors. So I'd like to welcome Kris Reynolds, all you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you to Champlain College for asking me to speak about this topic. Over the last few weeks, you have learned about trauma, the treatment of trauma, trauma in our students, and today we'll be talking about resilience. This is a discussion that I get very excited to talk about, as to me, resilience is the path forward through trauma and stress. Resilience is our internal ability to bounce back from and navigate through life stressors and or traumas. Our DNA initially identifies where our level of resilience starts out. However, it can be changed. The Center for the Developing Child at Harvard University uses the analogy of a seesaw, and I love this description of resilience. DNA places where the fulcrum starts out. Depending on where it's placed, it makes it easier for us to experience negative or positive outcomes as a result of life stressors. Life can also move where the fulcrum is positioned, making it easier or harder to experience positive or negative outcomes. This is what is so important to know about resilience, is that through practice and resilience building activities and positive interpersonal interactions, we can actually develop and increase our resilience. These capacities can be strengthened at any age. Adults who strengthen these skills in themselves can better model healthy behaviors for their children or younger people in their lives, thereby improving the resilience of our next generation. I want to stress the navigate through part of the definition of resilience rather than the bounce back. Life will still probably look different as we are experiencing stress or after a trauma has happened. The important part about resilience is not that you are, quote unquote, back to normal, but that you have redefined what you want your version of normal to be. Over the next several slides, I'll be showing you many strategies for building resilience. Just like in everything, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Some of these suggestions will work for you and others will not. The important thing is to try a range of resilience-building activities, and you will find a combination that works for you. I encourage you to think about how you might use these activities for yourself, how you might encourage your students, children, or other people in your life to use them. Before we actually get to the how, I want to spend one more moment on the why. Another way to think about the placement of the fulcrum is the concept of the window of tolerance. There are many different images and resources out there that describe this concept. If you Google it, you will find a ton. But the basic idea is that we all have a window of being able to tolerate stress. For some people, that window is small, and for others, it is wider. When we are inside the window of tolerance, we are able to learn, listen, have positive interactions, and take in the world around us. We are able to regulate our emotions and self-soothe when experiencing stress. When we are outside of the window, we either become hyper aroused, which can feel like anger, the fight response, or anxiety, or we become hypo aroused, which can feel like sadness, dissociation, or depression. The window of tolerance can become smaller or larger throughout life. It is very normal for the window to feel smaller during stressful times. So if we want to be in a space where we're able to engage with the world around us, we need to stay within our window of tolerance. One more quick pause before I actually share some strategies with you, because I think that it is always important to work towards doing better. I want to toss out a few critiques and reframes about the concept of resilience that I love so much. The term mental strength is often used when talking about resilience. It is often impossible to think about strength without implying weakness or an attempt to avoid weakness. And often analogies, metaphors, and language that are used to describe resilience assume able-bodiedness, and words and descriptions like resilience muscles are often used. We have to remember that everyone has different abilities and different goals for their abilities. We have to look at resilience through a lens that not only accounts for, but embraces people's physical, cultural, and individual differences. When the concept of resilience focuses on one's own strength, it also leaves out the larger social issues that perpetuate violence and put the responsibility of, quote unquote, bouncing back only on the person who's been harmed. As we will talk about resilience over the rest of this conversation, resilience is not a one-size-fits-all. And I encourage you to listen to the upcoming strategies with an open mind, while also acknowledging that it's okay if some strategies don't feel like good fits for you. The following 10 resilient strategies are just some of many different ideas out there for building resilience. We'll be talking about positivity, confidence, priorities, creativity, connection, structure, experimenting, feeling your feelings, patience, and uncertainty. The first strategy is positivity. This is a big one. This helps you see hope, possibility, and opportunity, and gives you a reason to engage in the challenges of life. Some strategies for building this. One way is to change the story. What do you tell yourself specifically about why bad things happen? Are you blaming yourself, telling yourself that you could have or should have done something different? Can you reframe this into, I did the best I could, sometimes bad things happen? Can you also work to identifying and challenging where you got the initial messages about why a stressful event happened? Is there a systemic or larger force of oppression at work in these messaging? When identifying these, you can work towards owning that some of these thoughts might actually not be yours. Make a list of gratitudes. Write down positive thoughts, things you are grateful for, things that made you laugh. And then take one step further and give yourself credit for your role in them. For example, something on my list might be, it was lovely out today, and so I made the choice to take a walk at lunch. A lot of people choose to make a list like this at the end of the day, as it's just a nice way to end your day on a positive note. Another strategy is to reflect on what has happened and try to find alternate ways of viewing it, maybe trying to find a silver lining. It feels really important to add with this exercise that it's essential not to minimize that something bad has actually happened. And many times, an event might not have a positive spin on the event itself, but maybe there's a positive way to view how you responded to the event. A lot of folks I work with who've experienced trauma tell me things like, I didn't realize I was this strong, or now I realize I have wonderful friends. Statements like these do not minimize the event itself. Rather, they shift focus onto something positive within the individual. You can also use reflection to think how you might feel about a situation in a few days, weeks, months, or years from now. This can help you change your perspective on the situation. The next strategy is confidence, recognizing that you can succeed even when it is hard or uncertain. This strategy helps us address challenges rather than giving up or using our energy being mad or frustrated. Or as my mom says, having a can-do attitude. Finding your strengths. Think about what you are good at. Think back over the day. What is one personal strength that helped you navigate the day? Ask others for help with this, or take a strengths assessment if you get stuck. Another strategy is to focus on learning. One of the biggest barriers to confidence is the fear of failure, because we tend to see failure as a bad thing, as evidence of weakness, rather than opportunity for learning. If we can shift our view to a growth mindset, we can start to see failures as opportunities to learn and try something new. When I give feedback to folks I supervise and students in my class, I talk about the idea of a growth edge, something they're on the edge of learning, rather than something they don't know or have gotten wrong. It can also help to try not to compare yourself to others, as we all have different strengths and different growth edges. Treat yourself like a friend. What would you say to a friend who is feeling stuck or thinks they have failed? Chances are it's not the narrative you are saying to yourself. That might be sounding like, I suck, I'm an imposter, I'll never get this. If you were talking to a friend, you'd probably say something like, I believe in you, you will get it next time, or keep trying. Our brain tends to believe what we tell it, and if we constantly tell ourselves a negative narrative, we will believe that narrative. And if we can shift that narrative to a positive, eventually we will start to believe it. The next resilient strategy is priorities. Folks who are resilient tend to have an internal sense of direction that they can rely on to guide their priorities and choices. When you problem solve, you need your priorities to decide on what is most important, what to handle later, what to ignore, and what to let someone else handle. You especially need to use priorities when things are feeling unstable. It can be pretty easy to make decisions when things are calm, but much harder when the stress and stakes are higher. If we are not clear about our priorities, we tend to waste a lot of time focusing on things that are not as important. So how do we build our priorities? One strategy is to simplify. It's much easier to make decisions when there are fewer options to distract you. This might mean possessions, activities, commitments, noises, etc. Saying no. This one is hard for a lot of people. Saying yes to everything can use up your resources on things that might not actually be important to you. This is something worth practicing. Setting goals. Set clear goals to help you focus on what is important to you. Setting big picture goals or long-term goals and short-term goals or daily goals can be essential to focusing on your priorities. One great strategy can be to write goals down every day or the evening before and review them at the end of every day to help you stay focused on them. Creativity helps us to see lots of ideas and multiple perspectives, rather than just sticking with the familiar way we have always done things. Creativity helps us to be mentally flexible and function more effectively when we don't know what is going on and when things are feeling uncertain. One of my favorite strategies for building creativity is the phrase, yes, and. I love this phrase. This phrase keeps us open to new possibilities, new ways to solve problems. It acknowledges that there is more than one right answer. When we answer with, yes, but, we have shut down the creative process by telling others or ourselves that they are wrong and that our answer is the only right one. Think about this one in the classroom and in interactions you have with your students or colleagues, or anyone who might have a different opinion with you. Another great idea to build creativity is to do an activity in which you are just letting ideas flow. You can practice this by trying to identify as many things that you can name in a specific category. For example, how many birds or flowers or countries can you name in 3 minutes? You can also use this to try to come up with new solutions to a problem. Just write down as many solutions as you can, no matter how out there, for 3 minutes. And just like when using confidence, it's important to be kind to yourself and treat yourself like you would a friend. When you are practicing creativity, try to resist judgment. Think about how differently you might view your ideas if instead of telling yourself, well, that's a stupid idea, it will never work, you told yourself, it could work, I will never know unless I try. Connection is all about building relationships that allow you to have people in your life that you can rely on for support. This is helpful because we don't have all the answers. Folks who have strong connections tend to use others as resources, as a supplement to their own knowledge. This is a strategy that you can help your students develop by strengthening your relationship with them and by encouraging them to strengthen their relationship to each other. The single most common factor for children or young adults who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. Another strategy for making connection is to be the one to start the conversation. This one can be challenging to work on if you identify as being shy, introverted, or experiencing social anxiety. If it feels challenging to you, test out some strategies that might help. Smaller groups, one-on-one conversations, ask people questions, focus the attention on the other person, use technology, send an email or a text. Another important aspect of building connections is to ask for help. When other people are able to help when you are experiencing a difficult situation, they are able to help carry some of the mental load and supplement some of your energy so that you're not the only one. Be specific when you ask for help. Do you want a hug? Do you want someone to listen and not give feedback? Someone to listen and give feedback? Often one of the biggest stressors in asking for help is people giving the wrong kind of support because we didn't actually tell them what we needed. Sometimes we may need to ask for a professional's help. Seeking a therapist or other mental health provider can be a great way to get unstuck. The last strategy in finding connections is finding a sense of purpose. Connect with something bigger than yourself. Volunteer, help a friend. For some people, there might be a religious or spiritual connection here. For some people, maybe not. Whatever the strategy for finding purpose, just find something to connect to. Having goals can also help with a sense of purpose because we know what we're working towards. Structure. This one is all about efficiency. When we have a structure, we're able to use our energy and time more effectively. This strategy can be especially helpful when we are experiencing stressful times. If we have a routine, you've probably been hearing that word a lot during this pandemic, it can help take the work out of what we're trying to figure out what to do. If you know at 5 p.m. each day you take a walk, or at 9:30 p.m. you brush your teeth, you can default to that when the stress is high and you're wondering, what do I do now? This can also help us from becoming overwhelmed. This is also a technique that is definitely not one size fits all. There are so many different options out there for building a structure, to organize, to making a schedule and planning your time. Test out some different things. Apps for making lists, keeping a notebook in your pocket, setting calendar reminders, color coding. The challenge is to keep trying and find something that works for you. The strategy of experimenting, helps us put plans into action when the situations are unknown or have some risk. Working on this, gaining comfort experimenting, can be especially helpful for folks who feel that they need to be perfect. One strategy to gain comfort in taking the risk to experiment is to use perspective. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Often it really isn't that bad. Someone might say no. We might end up in the same spot we're currently in. You can work towards building your tolerance in experimenting by taking small, calculated risks. Take a few bites of a new food. Drive on a road you've never driven before. Listen to a new kind of music. And again, use that skill of perspective of asking yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Your stomach might get upset from trying a new food. You might have to turn your car around, or you might not like the new music. Is the risk worth the best thing that could happen? You might find a new food that you love. You might see some sights you've never seen before, or find a new music that you love. After you've tried something new, reflect on how it went. Was it actually the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, or somewhere in the middle? Pay attention to how many times things are actually not the worst case scenario. Feeling your feelings. This strategy might go against some of our initial instincts to stuff our emotions or to distract them away. So often we struggle to actually identify how we are feeling. We might default to the typical, I'm fine, when we're actually not fine. It is okay to not be okay. When we can identify how we're actually feeling, give it a name, maybe say it out loud, we are able to actually feel what we are feeling. And then take it one step further and sit with it. Just the feeling. How does it feel in your body? Can you tolerate sitting with it for a few moments longer than you initially thought you could? Think about that window of tolerance. Often we think we are outside of the window when we feel a feeling. However, we're actually still in the window. We're just feeling uncomfortable by the feelings that we're experiencing. We often get taught that it's not okay to show or feel emotions. And we oftentimes think that resilience is all about being productive and confident. And while it can be that, it can also be sitting with and processing through your emotions. Remember that resilience is a process and not an end goal. It is hard to do new things, especially when we don't know what to expect, when we have no prior experience for our brain to connect things to. We are vulnerable in these moments, and yet showing up for them is how we grow. Find some acceptance for the fact that things will not go as planned, and use the skill of confidence and positivity to do this. Reframe your narrative. Talk to yourself as you would a friend. Remind yourself that you can do hard things. Remember to breathe and just slow down. Things don't have to go right at first. Uncertainty can be a difficult spot to hang out in, and yet it actually is where we spend most of our life. Finding some comfort in this space can be a large part of building resilience. Shoulds. Shoulds. Whenever we use this word, should, we are making an assumption. Pay attention to when you use this word. Often it's when we're talking about the way that things should be or what should have happened. If we can reframe these shoulds, we are able to open ourselves up to more possibilities and become more comfortable not making assumptions about how things are supposed to be. Reframe the thoughts. Yes, I'm recycling this one, but it's a good one. Can you reframe your thoughts about the unknown? Instead of it being scary, can it be exciting? Or instead of I can't handle it, can the thoughts be, I'm not excited about not knowing, but I can do hard things. Practice mindfulness. Mindfulness can be a great strategy to keep yourself in the present and minimize anxiety about the future or the unknown. Remind yourself about times in the past that you have coped with the unknown and have been okay. This strategy can be a great one to remind yourself that you have done hard things, and it might not have been easy, but you've made it through. One more thing. The overall body is important too. The term self-care might be a bit overused these days, but it's also an essential piece of mental health and building resilience. Stress impacts our physical health as much as it does our emotional health. Promoting positive, healthy life factors like healthy nutrition, good sleep, hydration, moving your body can strengthen your body to adapt to stress and reduce the toll that emotions like anxiety and depression can take on your body. This can also be an easy check-in question for yourself or your students. Asking something like, did you drink water today? Did you move your body today? When was the last time? If the last time you got a drink of water was more than an hour ago, get a drink or encourage your students to get a drink of water. There is a wonderfully cheeky interactive flow chart called You Feel Like Shit. That's what it's called. If you Google You Feel Like Shit interactive flow chart, you'll find it. It walks you through some basic self-care check-in questions and gives you suggestions when needed. Another important self-care strategy is to avoid negative outlets. Although it can be tempting to use alcohol, drugs, or other substances to manage stress, it's a fast but temporary solution. Focus instead on giving your body resources to manage stress, rather than seeking to eliminate the feeling of stress altogether. Another great resource is the University of Buffalo Social Work Department. They have a wonderful self-care starter kit and other strategies for developing self-care plans. One final musing before I let you all go. I got my start working with folks who've experienced trauma while I was living in Colorado in 2008. Colorado has some wonderful, amazing mountains, 14ers as they're called, because they are 14,000 feet above sea level. If you've ever had the opportunity to hike to the top of one, you know that not a lot grows up there, with the exception of some plants, including some very lovely flowers. Every time I made one of these hikes, I was struck by how hard those plants have to be working to not just survive, but thrive on top of that mountain. And yet, there they were, growing throughout the rocks and the harsh weather. You see images like the ones on this slide a lot for a metaphor for resilience. When I think about my clients and my students as they are navigating their way through both the good and the bad, I'm often reminded about these flowers and how beautiful resilience can be. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, Kris, thank you for your time. That was fantastic. What a great job. And what a great way to wrap up this fabulous 5-pack with such an upbeat chat with loads of strategies. It's just fantastic. So Kris has agreed to hang around for about 10 or 15 minutes. And got a few here. For someone who this is kind of new to, this idea, how might they become aware of their own window of tolerance, Kris?
Yeah, I think that's such what a great question. I think about thinking about times when you have experienced that feeling of feeling like you're outside of the window. So when have you kind of gotten angry? When have you maybe kind of felt like you've been kind of like checking out? And seeing if you can kind of catch when you start to get to that point. You know, I think about the window of tolerance as kind of like a scale. We've got kind of like a number scale. And if we kind of have like the positive side and the negative side, if we're on that positive side, we're in the window. And then we move outside of the window, we kind of start to move outside of the like negative side. So just kind of paying attention to where that feeling starts to shift, I think is one of the greatest strategies for paying attention to that window of tolerance.
Excellent, Kris. And I have somebody asking as we speak to put the if you put the resources back up there.
I said I was going to do that too, and I didn't do that.
And we've already got 1, 2, 3 thank yous to you.
Oh, nice.
And there's one. Christine has such a soothing and reassuring voice, wonderful content, thank you. So you've got all kinds of those up there. So we got a few more here. So, okay, now what, Kris, why can it be so much easier to be kinder to other people than it is to ourselves?
Oh my gosh. If I knew the answer to that, I don't think I'd have a job anymore, because I think we are so hard on ourselves. And I think that is such a great question. And I don't think I really know the answer to that. I think it's just kind of easier sometimes to not judge ourselves, to not judge other people. You know, I think we have a lot of shoulds when it comes to ourselves. Like, I should know better. I shouldn't have done that. And we don't do that as much with kind of other people who are kind of outside of ourselves. So I would love to know the answer to that if whoever asked that question comes up with it.
It's definitely a toughie. I agree with you. And now this one just slid in here after like your 3 or 4 thank yous.
Yeah.
And this is another thank you. Can you say more about how to think about strengths in the context of resilience? Are you saying we should just let this concept go?
Let this concept go. When I think about strengths, I think about kind of like things that you do well. And so I think sometimes people that think about the strengths and they think about like, okay, well, I am really good at being caring, or I'm really good. I persevere. I am like stubborn. I will kind of like fight my way through that. I think when we're thinking about it in the concept of resilience, we're wanting to kind of really focus on kind of the internal kind of what we do well, as opposed to sometimes the external pieces.
Excellent. We got another thank you. Somebody loved the different categories that you use. And Laura wants you to know she took a walk at lunch today.
Nice.
Let's see, a couple more. Do you have, Kris, do you have any tricks for getting better at saying no for someone who's working at that?
I think pausing and thinking about like what your priorities really are, and does the ask that you've just been kind of given, does that fit within your priorities? You know, and kind of really being able to kind of be honest. I think also sometimes some strategies sometimes it's hard to just say no. So sometimes saying something like, you know, I've got a lot on my plate right now, or ask me again in 3 months. You know, sometimes that can feel easier than just saying a blanket like no to something.
Right. No, that's good. And let's see, did you have a suggestion you brought up character strikes. Do you have a suggestion for anyone who can to go online and what a particular character strength assessment that you like?
You know, there's so many different ones out there. I'm actually kind of more partial to just asking someone, asking someone who's kind of in your life, like, hey, can you tell me kind of what you think
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
my strengths are? Because I think that also doubles in that kind of connection building
yeah,
one.
yeah.
But I think a quick Google search would kind of bring you to some different ones. And I think just like with all the skills for resilience, it's finding the one that kind of fits for you.
Right. So no, that is true. I know there are a bunch of them out there.
Mhm.
So overall, if somebody's not feeling particularly resilient, or maybe it's their young adult child or teenager or
Mhm.
younger child or whatever. So are you saying, Christine, that it doesn't just have to be like the school of hard knocks, so we can actually, proactively learn and build these skills?
Yeah, that is what I think is so exciting about resilience is you don't necessarily have to wait for something stressful to happen. These are skills that you can be building just all the time to kind of to work towards increasing that resiliency so that when something negative or hard or stressful does happen, you're that much more kind of able to cope with it and manage it.
Excellent. Like this looks like this is a same person, two things. What are your thoughts about addressing community trauma? And then it's the same person. It
Mhm.
says, and resiliency within a community context. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about addressing community trauma?
Mhm. That, oh my gosh, that's a great question. And I think when we're doing all of these things, we are addressing community trauma. And I think we can do that on like a bigger level. So if you are an instructor and you have a classroom, you have a community right there that you can do some of these kind of skill building pieces with. And then the hope might be they might kind of take that home to their community. We think about kind of like the steps out. And so
Right.
starting with kind of one person who might kind of teach somebody else, who might kind of teach somebody else. I think so much of this is about having the information. And if we don't have the information or know the skills, we're not going to be able to implement them. So I think it's just kind of sharing this knowledge with people is a big part for that community kind of resilience building.
No, I think that's fantastic, Chris. And as a colleague of ours actually said this morning,
Mhm.
whether we're in the classroom or, our wonderful attendees through all five of these, if even one person leaves a little lighter, a little brighter, it was all worth it,
Yeah.
right? And then it hopefully, like dominoes, keeps
Mhm.
trickling on. I think, like you got a litany of thank yous here. I think that Kris has a lot of fans. They're all coming through here.
Ah.
I want to thank all of you once again for attending. Remember, you can get all of these links on the Champlain College website with the same link that you registered with. It'll just say, there's a button to click that says watch instead, and also YouTube. And another big thank you to Kris and the other speakers for so generously donating their time for this huge, important conversation.